Hi, I'm Josh McGrath.
I'm Andrew Haas.
And this is the Ardent Pursuit Podcast. As we discussed in part 3 of Why Are Men Remaining Single, we are living in a low-trust society. In a culture where accusations can go viral, motives are constantly questioned, and commitment is conditional, it's no wonder so many men are opting out of relationships altogether. The risk just feels too high. This week, we're talking about that risk and why the answer isn't to run away, but to become wise in navigating it. Because the truth is, risk is unavoidable. But in a world full of bad risks, there are still good risks worth taking if you know how to spot them. We're going to break that down today and share practical principles to help you navigate the risky landscape with confidence, whether you're in a relationship right now or simply thinking about it. Don't forget to subscribe to the show. You can watch the video on YouTube or listen with Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And share it with friends because changing dating culture starts with changing the conversation. So, Andrew, this is kind of like a bonus episode. The first 3 episodes of, Why Are Men Remaining Single, we're just talking about the reasons, identifying some of the problems that are plaguing men. And we didn't really get into the solutions. And as we were discussing the third part, the low trust society, we realized in preparing for that episode, we got to talk about some solutions because these are some big problems. And we don't want to leave men left with just being like, okay, great, you pointed out the problems, but what do I do? How do I navigate a low trust society? And so today's episode is really focused on answering that question, providing an antidote to the low trust society issue.
Yes, we're going to try and help men discern between what is good risk and what is bad risk. Now, with good risk, these are risks that men should take. There's uncertainty, there's some unknowns, but generally speaking, the outcome, if done well, will not be harmful. In contrast to bad risk, where by and large the outcomes would be harmful, that is what we will strongly encourage men not to do.
Now, there's a great quote from Mark Zuckerberg. He says, "The only strategy that is guaranteed to fail is not taking risks." And we've discussed before that you can't avoid risks altogether. You can avoid dumb risks, but life is risky. And if you're going to pursue a romantic relationship, there are risks involved.
And that's one of the problems that men are facing categorically these days is that we just don't move. We don't take action. We stagnate. We don't want to do something because we don't think it's worth the risk. And we are going to challenge and encourage men, move forward, take good risk, learn to identify what is healthy risk, and move forward.
Because part of a low trust society is that it results in a people who are afraid to take risks because they don't trust the other party. And so, we are encouraging men, hey, identify good risks, know what those are, and lean into them. And if you do that, if you follow the principles that we've been discussing here on the show, it's not guaranteed, but it's going to better equip you to be able to pursue a romantic relationship that leads towards a flourishing marriage.
And so we've identified a few things here that we would consider good risk. For example, she rejects you. You spend time and energy on a relationship that doesn't lead toward marriage. She breaks your heart. You're not a fit, but your friends love you together. These are all could be worthwhile things to put your effort toward, do it well, but it doesn't necessarily end in a desirable outcome.
And guys will oftentimes want to know the outcome of the situation or the relationship before they enter into it. If they're going to risk, it's because they want to guarantee the reward. And the reality of any relationship, any romantic pursuit is there is no guarantee. You are entering into that pursuit with the hope, the ambition that that romantic relationship, that pursuit of that woman turns into a long-term relationship, leading towards covenant and marriage. But the reality is it may not. she may break it off with you. You may invest time, energy, and resources into that pursuit, and it doesn't lead towards marriage. But those are good risks.
Yeah.
Those are risks that men need to be willing to take. That's not a bad thing. And while, some men might have the hope, the dream that the first woman they date is the woman that they're going to marry, for the vast majority of people, that is not their story. And so don't hold out this irrational hope that the first woman you date is your, quote unquote soulmate. Newsflash, you don't have a soulmate. Right? So be willing to take the risks and understand that that's not a bad thing when those things happen.
Yes, a lot more men need to be willing to take on that risk of her rejecting you. Take on that risk of your heart being broken. These are risks that are good and can even be healthy to take on. It's not saying it's all going to work out.
Yeah.
But that's just what it is. Men need to move forward knowing the risks and having the confidence and the ability to handle that.
So some other, good risks that men should be willing to accept are things like by pursuing a particular woman that might have a negative impact on your friend circle. Why? Because maybe this woman is part of your friend circle. And so it changes the dynamic and the structure of your friends group. We've had an episode before where we talked about that. Your platonic friendship with her changes. You were once, maybe good friends, and now because you've tried to romantically pursue her, you can't go back to being just good friends, which we've talked about before. It costs you money and time. Here's an interesting one: missed opportunities, or another way of putting this is you're off the market. I want to park here for a second. You might have thoughts on some of those earlier ideas, but I've had conversations with men before where they are going to pursue a woman, and one of their questions is, well, if I pursue her, I'm not marrying her yet. I'm only dating her. But what if there's someone who comes along who maybe is a better fit? What then? And part of it is navigating this as a man is figuring out you are out, pursuing romantically a woman. And yes, at the outset of that, pursue, you're not committing to marriage, you're not in covenant, but you want to conduct yourself in an honorable way where you're not just, jumping from, relationship to relationship to relationship in hopes that, the grass is always greener and, you're somehow going to quote unquote find the one. You need to know how to navigate that in a healthy, as a Christian man, a godly way that honors and respects the woman. But yeah, you are kind of off the market for the duration of the time that you are pursuing this woman.
Yeah.
And you need to be okay with that. And your goal should not be thinking about what if someone better comes along, because that is a bad way to think about relationships. Because as a married man, I'm guessing one of the things you don't do is think about, well, what if there was a better wife for me?
Exactly.
You're not thinking that.
Once you make that decision is made and you walk forward with that.
Yeah.
Way too many men operate with a sense of FOMO, and it seems to only be increasing. There's this imminent fear of missing out, and it's you can attribute it to social media, to the ability to travel, but we now have, the world is our dating pool, essentially, and too many men get stuck in the mindset of, wow, she's awesome, but what if I meet someone better? And use wisdom, use discretion to evaluate and to walk all that out. But guys need to really watch out for this mindset of, this is good, but I'm holding out for something better.
One of the things that's interesting about men is that they're more apt to fall in love quicker than women. And the same is true for entering relationships. They're quicker to enter into a relationship than women. Also very interesting, women, there's a study that just came out and has all this data. I wish I'd printed it out. But women are much more likely to end a relationship than men.
Interesting.
And so it's fascinating because you've got men who are risk averse, low trust society, who want to know the outcome before they begin the process. And part of the reason men tend to be that way is because they're like ready to move quicker in the relationship. They're ready to commit quicker in the relationship. They're ready to go the long haul more often than women in today's society. And so men have to be aware of that tendency inside of them. And I'm like, hey, kudos for you for, falling in love quicker and, for wanting to enter a relationship quicker. That's awesome. We need men who take charge, who are going to lead, who are going to stay committed. That's great. But just because you have that tendency doesn't mean you need to fear pursuing a woman who may not match that same tendency. You have to be willing to risk that if you're going to romantically pursue a woman.
So those are some of the areas of good risk that we've identified, and we will strongly encourage men to engage in good risk. Now, there's a lot of bad risk that men can pursue.
Absolutely.
And too often when a guy is interested in a girl, he will lead with selfish motives, he'll lead with his sexual drive, and that will often have really dire consequences and really bad outcomes.
Absolutely. And we've actually identified 8 areas of bad risk. Obviously, there's tons out there, but we've identified 8 areas that men 100% can avoid based upon how they conduct themselves, their behavior, their attitude, what they say, the environment they're in. And these are things we're going to get to here in just a little bit. But these 8 things are: you're falsely accused of sexual assault or rape. She criticizes or doxes you on social media. You're accused of being creepy or a predator. She gets pregnant. You get an STD. She ends up being a terribly abusive, manipulative person. She is actually underage, or she is not a woman, or she has had gender reassignment surgery or procedures at some point in her life. So a lot here. We're not going to unpack it all in detail. But these outcomes, these negative, bad outcomes, are a result of men doing risky things that lead to risky outcomes that they could avoid had they changed their behavior on the front end.
And at first pass, a guy could look at something like this and think, okay, there is so much bad risk out there when it comes to pursuing a woman, when it comes to dating. So many unknowns, I'm just going to avoid the whole thing altogether. And I think, unfortunately, that's actually true for a lot of guys. There is a lot of these negative outcomes, but the reality is a lot of these are fully within your control as a guy.
For sure.
And so men need to conduct themselves in a way where these negative outcomes won't be a reality. That's actually within your control as a guy to prevent these.
So I know we're going to get into our solution in a little bit, and that's more of like principles that we're going to encourage men to walk out that will help them navigate the low trust society that we live in as they're pursuing a romantic relationship. However, I want to take a moment and just kind of talk through some of these and provide some specific ways that men could avoid finding themselves in such a situation, because these are not inevitable. So things like you're falsely accused of sexual assault or rape. Sadly, there's a long history of men abusing women because they lead with selfish motives, sexual desires. There are too many cases out there of women having been the victim of a man's selfish motives. That said, as a man who wants to romantically pursue a woman, you can avoid ever being in a situation where that accusation is levied against you based upon how you conduct yourself with her and the conversations you have around her. It's literally that easy. Most women aren't out there looking to accuse a guy of sexual assault. Obviously, there are plenty of cases. It seems like every other week, another news article comes out where there's a court case where a woman was found guilty of falsely accusing a man of sexual assault simply to get back at him or because she's annoyed at him or frustrated or whatever. So it does happen, unfortunately, more frequent than it should. But for the vast majority of women out there, this is not a goal of theirs. And so if the man is concerned about, well, what if she accuses me of this? I'm going to ask you, well, what are you doing that she might accuse you of that? What behaviors, where are you going with her? What are you doing with her? What are you saying to her that you're concerned that might be a risk? Because for the vast majority of men and women who conduct themselves in a healthy, normal, functional way, that's not a risk.
Yes, and if there is at all a risk of you being accused of being a creep or being a predator, that is something that you can dramatically mitigate. If you are in that sphere, if you're in that environment where that sort of thing is a possible outcome, you need to hit the brakes. You need to reevaluate of where you are and what you're doing.
And when it comes to, her talking about you on social media, some guys might think, well, I can't control whether she's going to talk about me on social media in a negative way. And I would say, well, the type of woman you're pursuing might dictate whether she's going to talk about you on social media or not. I don't know. Has she talked about other people on social media? Is she kind of like a known gossip? Is her life marked by her complaining about other people? Well, if that's the case, guess what? There's a very high chance that the type of woman you're pursuing is going to complain about you on social media. And so you might like her, you might think she's pretty, but is it worth the risk of being talked about on social media? You can mitigate that risk. That onus is on you as the man. And so men need to recognize that it's not like they're just a passive passenger in the car. And it's like, well, the relationship's going and there's nothing I can do. All these negative consequences and outcomes are just inevitable. No. You can set yourself up for more success based upon how you pursue her, the type of woman you pursue, and who's involved in that process.
And things like pregnancy and STDs are a risk, but fully within your control.
Absolutely.
Fully. No question. So if that is at all a risk that you're evaluating, again, hit the brakes, reevaluate, reassess where you are and what you're doing.
So men need to be able to mitigate and control for bad risks, because the reality is it's easy, unfortunately, to end up in a place where you're taking on risky behavior that's going to lead to, risky outcomes. And we've come up with 3 categories by which men can decrease their level of risk. So the 3 categories are, number 1, where you are, so your situation. Number 2, what you're doing, your behavior. And finally, number 3, what you're saying, so your words.
Yes, all 3 are very important, and men too often neglect to monitor or regulate their own behavior in these 3 areas.
And if men are aware of the environment that they're in, the behavior that they're conducting, and the words that they're saying, when you become aware of those 3 things, you're really able to reduce your risk. So let me give you an example real quick. So you're a man who wants to pursue a woman romantically, and you're like, hey, I want to take you out to dinner. And so you take her out to dinner, and you take her to a restaurant that's in the dead end part of town where there's very few people. Great restaurant, but sketchy area. And you go there together, and she's a little uncomfortable, but whatever. And then you have dinner with her, and you're being awkward during dinner, or you're drinking too much during dinner, or your behavior during dinner is you're scooching closer and closer to her throughout dinner, and then you're whispering in her ear, and you're lightly touching her arm, and you're laughing annoyingly at her or around her, and it's like these things are going to make her feel very uncomfortable. She's probably going to go back home and describe you as a creep. And rightfully so. And so if a man is aware of the environment that he's with this woman in, and he's aware of his behavior around her and towards her and what he's saying, that can really decrease the risk of, her making accusations of sexual assault, her making accusations of you being a creep or a predator, of her going online and talking about you. And if more men were just aware and actually brought in outside counsel and wisdom into this process, which I know is part of our solution here, they would be able to avoid some of these, risky outcomes.
And even in that hypothetical that you gave, that those sort of environments, we've seen it play out dozens of times, but it's always the guy trying to maximize his enjoyment or maximize his happiness,
that's a good point.
Maximize his interests.
Yep.
He orients himself, he conducts himself in a way to get what he can get out of the situation, and often that leaves very little regard for, is she having a good time? is this a blessing to her? Is this going to leave her in a better place? Is this going to leave her with a favorable opinion of the entire evening?
Yeah. So some things that men can do to decrease the risk in their life, include things like set clear boundaries early on in dating, avoid situations that could be misread, avoid oversharing personal details early on, and maintain respectful conversation and action at all times. Watch out for manipulation. Be alone at your own peril. That's a big one. Be ready to leave the relationship for the right reasons. Find out if she's divorced or if she has kids. Seek counsel from authority and accountability. And finally, listen to episodes 21 through 31. We talk a lot about the process of pursuing a romantic relationship there, and some of the things that men need to keep in mind. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. These are just some things to help men begin that process.
Yeah, there are a lot of pitfalls out there, a lot of risk. There are a lot of situations that guys can find themselves in, a few that we've identified. And we want to equip men to be able to handle life and these types of situations, know which ones to avoid, know which ones to engage with, and really, grow in wisdom, discernment, discretion, because so often these types of environments, some are obvious.
Sure.
But some of them aren't so obvious. And so, a guy really needs to walk forward with purpose and with discernment to really know, okay, is this going to lead to a good outcome, or do I need to change course?
And so many men, think they can do it on their own, and they crash and burn. They have a negative experience. They have a bad, risk. And then they're like, well, fine, the whole system's broken. I don't need a date. Relationships are stupid. When in reality, the problem wasn't relationships. The problem wasn't women categorically.
Right.
The problem was how they pursued her. The problem was they didn't have outside counsel and input. And this is why we harp time and time again on the importance of authority and accountability. And we talk about the importance of men having a brotherhood. You need that to be able to successfully walk out a romantic pursuit.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not women, it's not relationships, it's not the pursuit of somebody that is the problem. It's not all of the ways it can go wrong that's the problem. And too many men don't walk confidently into that.
Yeah.
They think, oh, there are too many risks, there are too many problems, there are too many ways for things to go wrong. I'm just going to avoid it altogether. But we want to challenge men to look at this as a worthy endeavor, something that's a risk worth taking in the right context. Identify the good risk, avoid the bad risk, and be willing to engage and move forward in this.
So one of the actionable steps that every man can take is, if you're interested in pursuing a woman, you want to take that information, that woman, what you know about her, what you know about her life, bring that to your authority and accountability. Bring that to a brotherhood. If you don't have either of those, then bring it to some friends and some family. Get some outside input. And I know that we actually have 5, questions that you should be asking when you sit down with outside counsel.
Yes, those 5 things are: who is worth pursuing, why you're pursuing them, look at your motives and your hopes, what your values and expectations are, how to move forward with wisdom and respect, and when you should consider pursuing her.
So these are, ideas, maybe questions that you can have a conversation with other people in your life to evaluate whether now or her is a good thing.
Yeah, and just a quick side note here, I will say, if a guy ever says, well, I don't have anyone close in my life with which to bounce these ideas off of, I would say, first of all, you need to figure that out before you think about pursuing somebody, because you're going to live life close, you're going to live in close proximity with somebody, you're going to live life with somebody and expect that to work, but there aren't other people in your life that you live life with and are close to.
That's a good point.
You first need to do that, have people that you can go to for advice, for wisdom, and really establish that, and then think about pursuing somebody.
And when you have those people in your life, it's amazing how when you just present the opportunity, the person, the situation, maybe your own actions or behaviors or plans, and they're able to give feedback, you find yourself in a much safer place, in a place where you're much more confident because you're not just shooting your shot, shooting from the hip, hoping that it works. You've actually put some thought into this with outside counsel and wisdom. And it's funny because in so many other areas of life, we rely on people's input. I don't know the last time a human being bought something on Amazon that hadn't been rated yet. It must happen because
Has to.
people are putting new products on there. But you better believe I'm not the guy who's like, yeah, let me try this new sponge. 0 ratings so far. We live and die. We shop and sell based upon ratings.
Yeah, that's true. We look in most other areas of life, we often will look for feedback either directly or we'll just wait for others to, share their thoughts. And we so often rely on others to help us, fill in the cracks of have a better view of what's going on.
But when it comes to relationships, at least for many men, they're like, I've got this. I don't need anybody else's help. I don't need any outside counsel or wisdom. I don't need any other input. I can do this. And I'm telling you right now, if we all had some public rating based upon how we do our romantic pursuits, I think we'd pursue very differently. All right, I think that's a good place to conclude. So, gentlemen, the world is full of real risk, but also real opportunities. The difference is knowing which is which and having the courage to move forward with wisdom. Your homework this week is to first consider the examples we gave of good and bad risks and write out your own list. Ask yourself, what negative outcomes are possible if I were to pursue a woman? Then separate those into 2 categories of good and bad risk and filter them through the 3 principles we discussed today: situation, behavior, and words, to determine what your risk factor is. Finally, discuss it with your authority or accountability or the men from your brotherhood, because you never were meant to navigate this alone. Whether you are a naturally more or less risky person, whether you're currently in a relationship or not, you'll benefit from thinking this through and becoming the kind of man who avoids pitfalls and understands how to take prudent risks. You can't avoid risk, but you can avoid dumb risk. As always, we love having you here on the Art and Pursuit podcast, and we look forward to having you here next time.